Hi everyone, welcome back. So we're going to jump straight into the modeling process for our drink bottle. The first thing we want to do is just double check that Maya is actually reading our project folder. So what we'll do is come up to the File menu, down to Set Project. And what we want to do is select our bottle tool folder. Just there. So this is obviously going to be located wherever you saved it. So you might have to navigate through to your external hard drive or maybe the student work directory and look for this folder. Quite often I'm finding that a lot of beginners will often mistake this step for actually opening the file. All we're doing here is telling the software to look for files inside this folder when we try and open them or import them while we're working. So I'm going to tell it to look for the bottle folder. So we just press select folder. Now what we can do is start working by opening files or importing them and doing things like that. The software will know where to look for them. So let's import a file. So what we're going to do is import the profile for the bottle. So I'm going to go to File, Import, and you can see here, as I mentioned in the introduction video, by default when you try and import something, it's going to look in the data folder. What we're going to do is navigate back through to the scenes folder, because that's where we stored those My Binary profile files. So what I'll do is just go back one folder level. All right, so I'm now just inside the project folder. And if I come down to the scenes folder, open that up, you can see here on the PC it's empty. On the Mac you'll probably be able to see all the files in here, but they'll be grayed out possibly. The reason that this is happening is that the software is trying to open up, in this case, it's trying to open up an OBJ type file. An OBJ is an object file. It's sort of you can think of it as being a generic 3D file that most 3D software packages can open and export. And it's one of the older 3D file types that's been available for probably the best part of a couple of decades now, I would say. What we need to do is just change this to a My Binary file, which is up here. Now the Mac interface is going to be a little bit different, but you'll probably have a similar option where you can change the type of file that you can import. It may be a drop down near the top of the panel, maybe up here somewhere, and I think it might just say Maya files rather than all files or something like that. Just have a bit of a look around the interface panel and you'll be able to find the option. So there it is, bottle profile. So I'm going to open this up. There we go. So you can see here in the introduction, I was sort of talking about how I had created a path in Illustrator and I imported it into Maya. This is what the path comes out like, or this is sort of the resulting curve that's been created. This is an actual curve object. Maya can create curves in a sort of a similar way as you can do in Illustrator and Photoshop using this curves panel. You can kind of create curves like this. There are several other methods for creating curves, but you can basically do it in here from scratch. Technically, we could have created this curve just straight in Maya, but I wanted to kind of show you this process and kind of explain that you can actually import paths, vector paths from Illustrator. That might come in handy if you were doing a job for a client. Let's say a client has a logo for their business and that logo has been designed in Illustrator. You can actually import the Illustrator logo straight into Maya and then extrude it into a three-dimensional object, for example, and then do like a little animated logo for your client, rather than having to create the whole thing from scratch in Maya. So, the tool's useful for doing things like that. And you'll find that import function under the Create menu, just down here, Adobe Illustrator Object. I'm not going to go through the whole process of this, but I just sort of want to point this out, just so you've got a bit of an idea how I imported the Illustrator file and then created this curve from it. Basically, all I've done is created a curves type object. There is this bevel thing which will do kind of three-dimensional polygon versions of the object, but I tend to find sometimes this doesn't work as expected. It's a little bit finicky to use, so all I've done there is just use curves. And for the process we're using for modeling our bottle, this is all we need. Okay, so let's transform this into a three-dimensional object. As I mentioned a little bit earlier, what we're going to be doing is creating what's called a NURBS surface. So usually you'll probably be familiar by now with a few modeling tools in Maya, and primarily what we've been doing is looking at polygon modeling tools, which you'll find under this Polygons tab just here. Now, this is a curve, so polygon tools don't work on curves. We need to use a different tool set. And in this situation, what we're going to be doing is using the Surfaces tab, and we'll be using this tool just here, which is called Revolve. So some of these tools look similar to the polygon tools. We've got a sphere and a cube and a cylinder and a cone and plane, torus, and so on. Although these create more or less the same shapes as the polygon versions, these versions of those shapes are created out of NURBS surfaces. A NURBS object is, the term NURBS is short for non-uniform rational B-spline. A mathematician could probably tell you what that means, but basically, to give you a layman's perspective of it, if you imagine a trampoline with a metal frame, the metal frame in this case would be the curve that we see here. The mat on the trampoline, the stretchy, bouncy part of the trampoline, is basically the NURBS surface. So it's a surface which is basically stretched over a frame. And if you change the shape of the frame, the surface will change shape to fit the frame. So it's sort of like a calculated kind of stretchable surface, which you can wrap over cages made out of curves in 3D software packages. Most 3D software packages has some version of a NURBS surface, although they do sometimes term them under different names. So let's take a look at how this tool works. What I'm going to do is double click the Revolve tool just here, and we'll get our Revolve options appearing. So basically what this tool is going to do, it's going to take this curve and it's going to spin it around the middle of the grid along the y-axis. So basically it's going to flip around sort of this way. And as it rotates or revolves, it's going to more or less draw a NURBS surface around the edges of the curve until it forms what looks like a solid object. Okay. So let's take a look at the settings. We want the axis preset set to Y, and this is so it spins in an upright position. Okay. Now the pivot point, technically we could use object. If we have a look at the selected object's pivot point, if I turn the move tool on, for example, you can see here at the moment the pivot point is actually sitting down here. Technically, what we need is the pivot point to be in the middle of the grid. Okay, but rather than moving that across to the middle of the grid, what we can do is set the pivot point to preset and then just type in 0, 0, 0, which you can see here. What this does is it basically spins the object around the middle of the grid. Now this has been, I've positioned this so that it's sitting in exactly the right spot. So you shouldn't be moving this object at all, or changing the shape of this object at all. It's set up ready to go as per these settings. The next setting down, surface degree, you can leave that on cubic. Then the start and sweep angles, the start sweep angle needs to be left on 0, and that's basically the position that the object is in at the moment. The end sweep angle needs to be set to 360, like this. Now what that's going to do is rotate this around 360 degrees. Use tolerance can be left on none, and the segment should be set to 5. Now this is important. This is very, very specific. If you have a look on the bottom of a soft drink bottle, you'll note that on many of them, and in particular the one that I was using as reference, it has 5 bumps on the bottom of the bottle. And that's what, they're kind of like little feet that the bottle kind of stands up on. Okay, so we're using 5 segments so that we can actually create those 5 bumps. Now, depending on the design of the bottle, that potentially could change. So it's absolutely not vital that this segment's value be 5, but that's the value that I'm doing, okay, for this, because the bottle that I was using as reference had 5. So that's the reasoning behind that. Okay, so the next settings down, we've got curve range, and you can leave that to complete. The output geometry, we have NURBS, and we have polygons. Now, technically, we'll be converting this to polygons later on. Technically, what we could do is actually create polygons from the get-go. We could actually turn it into polygons right now using these settings here. And if you take a quick note of these settings, just sort of what this looks like, I'm going to show you a different way of creating polygons with a different tool, and that will allow you to, in future, you'll be able to actually convert any NURBS object into polygons using that tool. So a version of that tool is sort of what we're seeing here built into the Revolve tool. Not all NURBS surfaces are created with the Revolve tool, which is why I want to show you how to convert them separately to this option. So what we're going to do is leave the output geometry on NURBS just here. So when we've got these settings in, what we do is we press Revolve like that, and you'll see that we get this cage appearing. Now at the moment it sort of just looks like a cage of lines or a cage of curves. If we press 5 on the keyboard, or we come up to Smooth Shade All and we click that, you'll notice that it's actually formed what appears to be a solid object. Okay, now notice that the bottom is flat, and in the introduction I kind of explained that what I've done is left the bottom flat so that we can actually form those bumps on the bottom a little bit more easily. There's no way of really revolving those shapes around very easily, so I've left it sort of like this. Certainly not the only way of doing this, but this is sort of the way that I'm going to do it for this project. Okay, so let's convert this object. Okay, so I'm just clicking on the object to make sure it's selected. Keep in mind here that the curve is still in there. You'll notice that there's this kind of heavy green line, this slightly thicker green line. This is where the sweep angles are for this object. So basically this is actually split open down this line. So it's like this line, but there's 2 of them, which is why it's kind of double thick. The curve is sitting, the original curve that we used is sitting just in there, which I have there selected like that. We don't need to worry about that. We just need the main bottle selected by itself. Okay, so what we're going to do is come up to the Modify menu, and we're coming down to Convert NURBS to Polygons. And you'll see we've got a whole ton of different conversion tools here. What we want is the first one, NURBS to Polygons. So we're going to take a NURBS object and convert it into polygons. We'll go into the options by clicking the box here at the end. Okay, so you'll probably recognize these settings as they're basically the same settings as we saw just before in the Revolve tool. But these are separated out as their own independent tool. So we can use this on any NURBS object rather than just ones that have been revolved. So the settings that we want, as you can see here, we want type set to quads, and this is the kind of polygon we're going to get. We want 4-sided polygons for this rather than triangles. The tessellation method can be set to general, and this gives us these options below. The 4 options that we want to double check are the first 4. U type, number U, V type, and number V. U type needs to be set to per span number. Okay, we have three options in here. We've got per surface number in 3D and per surface number. Then we have per span number, and that's the one that we want, the bottom option. The number that we want is 4, okay, for number U. We then put the same settings in for V type and number V. Basically what this is saying is, it's saying we're going to have 4 divisions, okay, 4 polygons across a span. So a span is the distance between one of these lines and the next line along. Okay, so basically from here to here, that's one span. So what it's going to do is split this distance up into 4 polygons. Now, the U and V represent horizontal, which is U. Okay, that's the direction across the span. And V, which is the vertical direction across the span. So it's going to split each of these panels into 4 divisions horizontally and vertically. So one panel will end up being 16 polygons. Okay, and that's for each panel that you can see here. So with those settings punched in, what we can do is press tessellate, and you can see the object divides up. Now what's happened is it's duplicated the object and converted it to polygons. So the lines are all kind of dotty like this because we've got a polygon object sitting on top of a NURBS object. We're going to separate them out and just clean the scene up a little bit. What I'll do, without deselecting anything, I'm going to turn the move tool on and then just grab the move handle and drag it to the side. So I've got my polygon object here, and we can use all of our regular modeling tools like extrude and so on this object if we wanted. And we have the original NURBS object as well as the curve that we used. So all of those objects are still sort of existing there. What I'm going to do is clean the scene up a little bit by hiding these 2 objects, because I'm not going to need them really anymore. But if I accidentally kind of delete something on here, or I completely mess up what I'm doing and I want to start again, I can just unhide this and do another conversion and basically, you know, start modeling my bottle from this step. Okay, so what we'll do is we'll create a layer for this and hide it. So I'm going to drag a box across part of the bottle like this, and what this is doing is selecting the bottle and also the curve. I'm going to come across to my channel box layer editor. Okay, don't forget that in order to have these tabs visible, all 3 icons in the upper right need to be active. So channel box layer editor, and down here in the bottom half of the panel, I'm going to come across to the right hand icon, which is called create a new layer and assign selected objects. So I'm just going to click that, and it's going to place these selected objects into this new layer. Now I can see that they're in there because at the moment, just above, I've got these inputs, and the first one says layer 1. So this object is connected to layer 1, which is down here. Alright, so you can always see if an object is in a layer because the layer name will appear under the inputs just here in the channel box. So let's rename this layer so I know what's in here. So I'm going to double click here on the layer name, and I'll just highlight this and then type in a new layer. I'm going to call this NURBS curve. Now notice that I'm putting capital letters at the beginning of the words, but I'm not putting a space between. In this panel, Maya will not let you put spaces in. You can put an underscore like this, but you can't put a space. And if you try and put a space like this and press save, you'll get an error message saying you can't put a space. A white space character is a space. Okay. So what you need to do is either do an underscore or do capitals at the beginning of your words so that you can kind of separate them. This is sort of the stock standard way that Maya functions. It does these capitals, and you'll notice them up here. So Revolve surface 1 here, which is the name of this object. You can see here they've put a capital at the beginning of surface, but it's all one word. All right, so that's a sort of a convention that you should get used to when you're in Maya and you're reading a lot of the names. So I'm going to leave it like that, press save. So you'll notice that nothing changes. All right. you can see that the name has changed down here though. What we're going to do is lock this layer. So to do that, what we do is we press in this little middle box once, and you can see it changes to a T, and over here the object turns into this wireframe. What this has done is turn the layer into a template layer. So I can see the wireframe version of the model, but it's actually locked. I can't do anything to this model. All right. What I'm going to do is click it again, and that will change it to an R, and this is a reference layer. Now, once again, you can see the object has become solid, so I can actually see the surface of the object. However, if I deselect it and then try and reselect, you can see that it's locked. I can select this object because it's not in a locked layer, but this one over here, I can't do anything to it. Okay, so that's kind of locked, and it's safe. I'm not going to accidentally delete it or extrude it or do something silly with it. But it's actually in the way. It's blocking that part of the viewport, and I need to get this object back over here so that I can start modeling. So the problem here is that it's actually in the way. So what I want to do is hide it or change the visibility of it. To do that, I press the V button just here in the layer, and V is for visibility. So this is like a little eyeball tool, or the little eyeball buttons you get on layers in Photoshop and Illustrator. So you can just click the V button and it'll hide the layer. Then what I do is select the bottle and come back over to the channel box, just up here, Translate X, just change this back to 0, and it will jump the bottle back to the middle of the grid. And then you can just press F to center the viewport on the object and turn the move tool off. So that's the beginning of our bottle. Okay, so in the coming videos, what we're going to do is change the shape of this a little bit. We're going to, first of all, create the bottom section of the bottle and kind of get those bumps going, or the little feet. And then what we're going to do is come up to the top here, and we're going to create a thread on the neck, just here. And we're also going to create a cap to go over the top of the opening. So what I'm going to do is save this file right now, and then what we'll do is progress on to the next video. So what we'll do is go to File, Save Scene, just here, and it'll go straight to the Scenes folder, and you can see the existing bottle profile. So we're not actually in this file at the moment. We're actually in a new file. So what I'm going to do is just type a name in. So I'm going to call this TVC Bottle 001. Okay. So the next time I save the file, I'll save it as TVC Bottle 002. So all I have to do is change that last letter or number. Okay, so just press save. Okay, so that's it for this video. In the next video, as I said, we will continue on with the modeling process, and we'll start to add a little bit more detail to this object. So I'll see you then.